Okay, welcome again. Now we will talk about genetic computing. To give you the context, in the beginning we talked about symbolic AI. You remember? Symbolic AI is about modeling the world as a sequence of symbols that are connected with each other. You have a database full of objects that are symbols that represent objects in the real world. So you have the chair as a symbol, you have a dog as a symbol, and these then can be connected they can be arguments to predicates. So the dog is big is a predicate big, and the argument is the dog. And then you can connect these predicates again with logical operators, and in this way you can try to create an ontology of the world, right? And this is how Psych works, this is how Prolog works, this is how expert systems work. So, sorry, I still have a cold. So this is the idea of symbolic AI. And then we have neural networks, which we talked about just previously, deep learning, deep neural networks, which are inspired by the way the brain works. So you have these little small units, these individual neurons, and these don't do much themselves, but you connect them, thousands of them, with each other, or in the case of our brain, billions of them. And although each one only sums up its inputs and then produces or does not produce an output signal, that's all they do. But if you put them together in the right way, then they can do some things very well. For example, they can classify an image and tell you what the content of the image is. Or a neural network is very good at recognizing speech and transforming understanding speech and transforming speech into text, so that you can speak to your Google Assistant and this thing will understand what you are saying. This is something neural networks can do. This is something symbolic AI cannot do well. But there are other things symbolic AI can do well and neural networks cannot do. For example, calculating. Right? A symbolic AI program has no problem adding two numbers together, no matter how big the numbers are. When you want to add two numbers, what do? You go to a computer, you go to a calculator, because these machines, symbolically programmed, are good at this. Neural networks are very bad at calculating, which you see from your own brain. When you try to add two big numbers, you cannot do it. You need a piece of paper, or you need a computer, you need a calculator to do it for you. So there are some applications where symbolic AI is better. There are some applications where neural networks are better. And now we come to a third kind of AI system, which is genetic computing. Okay, so with genetic computing, what we want to do is not like in deep learning to model the way neural networks work in the brain, but we want to model the way populations of organisms evolve in the process of natural evolution. And again, like it was with neural networks, this is just a metaphor. It's not like really genetic computing is about modeling how genetics works in biology. This is not what we want. It's a metaphor that allows us to create a particular computational model that is useful in order to solve problems. Right? Let's see how this works. So first you have to remember some of your concepts of evolution that you perhaps know from school. Try perhaps for a moment to stop this video and think about how does evolution actually work. Okay, so the way it works on a very rough level is that you have a population of individual organisms. Think of animals or plants. You have a population of giraffes, and they are situated in a particular environment. They have these tall trees where they want to eat the leaves, right? And you have in the population a variation of genetic material. You have different giraffes. You have smaller ones and bigger ones, and some that have longer legs and some have longer necks, right? And possibly you have some mutations, but not necessarily. What is a mutation? Do you remember? A mutation is a random change of genetic material that is randomly changed for various reasons. This can be reasons from the outside. It can be a mutation due to some radiation. When you go close to a radioactive source, a nuclear power plant or something, then part of what radiation sickness is that your body undergoes some mutations, or another source of mutations could also be inside the body. A cell makes a mistake when it copies the genetic material while it splits into more cells. And so you have random changes in genetic material. These are generally not good, so we don't want to have many mutations. So nature generally tries to avoid mutations. The cells repair their own genetic material, put a great effort into repairing it instead of letting it mutate. And then you have recombination is another thing, which in sexual reproduction means that you have the genes of the father and you have the genes of the mother. And these are combined, and then pieces of the father's genetic material are combined with pieces of the mother's genetic material. The genes are split at some point, and then you can imagine you have this gene, and then this is split at some point, and then the one half of the father is connected with the other half of the mother, and you get a new gene that contains part of the father and part of the mother, right? And this is why children look partly like their fathers and partly like their mothers. They have, let's say, the eyes of the father but the nose of the mother, right? This is what we see in the phenotype, and when we look at them from the outside, we see that they have parts of the one and parts of the other person, traits of the one and traits of the other. And the whole point now of this natural evolution is that you have a selection under pressure from the environment. This means that the environment selects the best individuals according to some criteria. In a natural environment, in biology, this is about surviving. So the better your genes are, the more you survive. Back to the giraffes. You have these giraffes with the long necks, and they want to reach a particular leaf on the tree, and the trees grow taller so that the giraffes cannot eat their leaves, but then the giraffes also grow taller, and those with the longest necks can reach the leaves best. So these then survive, and the pressure is that these who cannot reach the leaves, they will go hungry and eventually they will die. They will not procreate. So their genes will be lost, while the genes of those that can reach the leaves will be propagated to the next generation. So after a generation, you have more giraffes with long necks, because those that had parents with long necks, now the children exist, and where the parents had short necks, the children don't exist because the parents have died out, right? So this is the pressure from the environment, is the longer tree, the higher tree, and this creates a pressure on the giraffes to develop longer necks, because only those with longer necks will survive if the trees grow higher. And because the offspring has similar genetic material as the parental organism, so if the parents have long necks, then the children are likely to have long necks too, and this creates this adaptation of the giraffes to their environment. So here you see the whole thing in a graphic. You have on the top the initial population, these colored balls, and let's say each colored ball is some genetic trait, is some chromosome that carries a particular gene, and then you have, let's say we want to select the yellow ones. The yellow ones are well adapted to the environment. They are the ones that survive. And next you have a fitness test. You have your population in the environment, and now you have a fitness test. Is the individual gene yellow? And if it's yellow, then it survives. Let's say yellow means the giraffe has a long neck. If it's yellow, it survives. If it's not yellow, if the giraffe has a short neck, then it dies, right? And so now you select the best parents. This is step 3. We are going down on the left side of this graphic, right? Step 3, we select the best parents, and these are all the parents that are yellowish, where the giraffes have longish necks. And now these breed and survive, and the others die out, right? Because the short necks don't get anything to eat. So now your population of children will ideally be children that are all yellowish. Everybody else has died out. Of course, this is not in reality the case. There are also shorter trees, and there are shorter giraffes can perhaps survive on shorter trees. This is a statistical thing. More yellowish ones will find it easier to survive. But in the long run, of course, this will be true that the yellow ones will survive better. And now the children perhaps mutate. Again, mutations are not very common. The biology tries to avoid them, but they will kind of sometimes happen. And they happen more actually in computing simulations. Mutations are more common than they are in biology. And then you get a new population, which now is mostly yellow. So it doesn't look anymore like this initial population. It would be mostly yellow, with some mutations also being, red and blue. And then you do the same thing again. And you go again through the circle and again. And you can see that this will optimize eventually. It will try to reach the ideal case where the balls are clearly yellow. And this will happen, right? If you wait long enough, you will have yellow balls there. Okay. So now, what about mutations? Mutations are ambiguous in this whole system, right? They're small random changes of the genetic material, but they are not always beneficial. Because they are random, they can also destroy the organism. And now you can think a little, are mutations beneficial? And perhaps you compare, a very simple organism, like a virus, to yourself. You're also a biological organism with cells and DNA. If a random mutation happens in a virus and a random mutation happens in your own genetic material, which is likely to be more beneficial? A mutation to you or a mutation to the virus? Think about it for a moment. So obviously, the more complex the organism, the more likely it is that a random mutation will be harmful. And why is this? Because more complex organisms depend on a more precise relation between their parts to function. Random changes are more likely to break something. So you have many parts, right? Your eyes, and the eyes themselves are incredibly complex. They have a lens, and they have some muscles there to move the lens, and they have all kinds of blood vessels going to these muscles, and you have an optical nerve, and all these things have to coordinate and work together. And this is only the eyes, right? Imagine all the other organs in your body. Everything has to work together. And if something doesn't cooperate well with something else, then you are ill or you are dead, right? In a very simple thing like a virus, there is not much, right? So if you have a mutation, there is less to break, because the thing is very simple. The organism, a virus, is very simple anyway. So changing something is more likely to give it a new ability than it is for you, and the chances of breaking it are less, right? So take an example of making a hole in the leaf of a plant, right? Let's say the mutation causes a hole to appear. A hole in the leaf of a plant does not affect the plant much. You can go take a, instrument like this here, go to your favorite plant and start making holes into its leaves. The plant will not die. The plant will probably perfectly well survive with a few holes in its leaves. If you try to do this to yourself, a same-sized hole in the body of a human is more likely to be a serious injury, or even lethal. If I make a hole of this size in my heart, right, then I'm dead. So the plant survives the hole better than I survive the hole. And why is this? Because of my complexity. My complexity is higher, so our human bodies have a higher complexity. Therefore, random changes are more likely to break them. You can see this also with other systems. Instead of taking biological systems, you can take words. The more complex a word is, the more likely it is that the random mutation will break the word, meaning it will make it into a non-word. Right? For example, 3-letter words are more robust to one letter changes. See here, if I have the word cut, and now I do a 1-letter mutation, I change 1 letter with a random other letter, and then I mostly get good words still. The cut with a mutation can become cat, or it can become cup, or it can become butt, or it can become put, and these are all words. So many random mutations will produce valid words. It might also produce garbage, of course, like CPT, CET, CUC, and so on, which are not words. But still, many of these mutations will produce valid words. With a 5-letter word, it's much harder to find meaningful mutations. So hello has a few mutations that are good, like cello, which is still a word, but it's hard to think of another. Everything else I could do to it by replacing random words will make it into a bad word. Cello is not a word, and fellow is not a word. Fellow would be if I also had a W at the end, right? But most of the words I can construct, tello and teto and so on, right, are not words. And so here, these are all destructive mutations, right? And if I have an even longer word, something like automobile, then clearly replacing a letter randomly in the word automobile is not going to give me a word, right? And then programs can evolve over many generations to perform particular tasks. I give you some examples here, which I don't want to play in the video because right now I have the problem that my computer is too slow. If I try to play this, probably it will not work very well. I tried this previously, and this computer I have at home is not particularly good. So I don't do it here on the video now, but you can do it. Playing Snake, you can go to this link, or you can just look for it by searching, say AI, genetic algorithms, Snake, and then you will find these things. Other people have tried to evolve cars to drive up a mountain road without falling over, so the whole shape of the car is evolving from genes. So you have some genes that describe the back wheels and the front wheels and how long the car is and how big the wheels are and how far they are apart. And from this you can evolve different shapes of cars, and some are more able to go up a hill than others. Or virtual creatures evolving to perform various tasks. A very nice simulation, I think this is the one where you have different shapes of underwater creatures evolving. They try to move through the water by having fins or wings or legs that are all made of polygons of boxes, essentially, right, of rectangular boxes. And these boxes are arranged in different ways on the creature, which is controlled by the genes of the creature. So by evolving, the creature creates different ways of moving its limbs, and then they can perform different tasks. So they can fight against each other for something, or they can move around more or less efficiently. So this is very interesting. And the next one, also learning to shoot an enemy creature. This is a video of somebody who has created a genetic algorithm to optimize fighting abilities of two programs that fight against each other. So the program has to learn to avoid being hit, and at the same time it has to learn to hit the other program. And more evolving cars. So just look at these links here, try them out, and you will see that it's a lot of fun to play with these things. And you also find online, not in YouTube, but then on web pages, you find people who have created such things that you can play with. Not only watch the video, but you can actually change the parameters and you can do something. So this is, there are endless amounts of such demonstrations online, so go there and play with them. So now the question is, what are the differences between neural networks and genetic algorithms? Are they similar? Are they different? So one different is that neural networks adapt the weights inside one individual. It's one individual that learns during a training phase, and the individual itself changes, it learns. Genetic algorithms, on the other hand, don't typically change the genes of one individual. Instead, a whole population of individuals competes. One individual competes against the other, and the most successful ones survive and reproduce, and the population as a whole learns, not a particular individual. So normally the individuals in a genetic algorithm just survive or die. They don't change. They are born with a particular traits, and if the traits are beneficial, they survive. If the traits are not beneficial, they die. And this is the difference to neural networks, where normally you have a smaller number of individuals, one normally, because it's difficult to simulate so many neurons and then to do it for different individuals, right? So there you have one individual, and this one evolves. So this is one small difference. The other is, in genetic algorithms, you have an evolutionary pressure. In neural networks, you have an error at the output, right, of the neural network. So there are similarities to them, but there are also differences to them. And neural networks are much better researched than genetic algorithms. Genetic algorithms are not generally used so much. They have not been researched so much, and there are not so many different ways, different kinds of genetic algorithms, and they are not so well adapted to particular engineering tasks as neural networks. Because of the big research that has gone into neural networks, we have different types now, and these different types are known to be good for particular problems. Genetic algorithms are not yet classified so well in such detail and applied to particular engineering problems. So, but generally it seems that they are roughly comparable in the way they work. Both have a target condition, an optimum. The optimum for a neural network is to minimize the error. The optimum for a genetic algorithm is to survive, to pass the fitness test, and to approximate the fittest individual. And they progress slowly by changing their weight or changing their genes towards the optimum that is required of them. And both are, in their classic form, supervised in the sense that they are told what the optimum is. The neural network knows what the desired output pattern is that it has to approximate. The genetic algorithm knows what the fitness condition is. So they are both supervised kinds of learning. Okay, so that's it. Stop here for the genetic algorithms. And last thing, next time we will talk about the practical significance of neural and genetic computing. We already talked a little about it. This is just a summary. Why do we need these things in engineering practice? Okay, so thank you and see you in a moment.